Welcome to my channel. Please support my channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing this story. Thank you so much. The sound of rain against the window made Emily pause. It was one of those slow, gray mornings in Portland when the world seemed to whisper for you to stay in bed a little longer. She pulled her cardigan close, brushing a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear as she stared at the fog curling around the pine trees outside. She had come here, her sister's house, to find peace, to heal. After the messy breakup with Daniel, she needed distance from her fast-paced city life, the pressure, the noise, and the constant reminders of what could have been. So, she'd taken her sister's offer to stay for a few weeks, just outside the city, where life was quieter and hearts could mend in silence. The house was warm and smelled faintly of coffee and cinnamon rolls. Her sister, Claire, was out for work, and Emily had the place to herself. Well, almost. Her nephew Ryan was home too, taking a semester off college after an injury during a basketball game. At 19, he was thoughtful, grounded, and a little quieter than she remembered. The last time she'd seen him, he was just a kid running around the backyard with muddy shoes and a gap-toothed smile. But now, he had grown into someone different, taller, sharper, with that kind of gentle confidence that caught her off guard. That morning, Emily had decided to clean up a bit. She was halfway through scrubbing the bathroom sink when she realized she'd left her phone in the kitchen. Music made everything better, so she left the water running and hurried out to get it. When she returned a few minutes later, the door creaked open and that's when it happened. Ryan was standing inside the bathroom, holding a dripping mop. He turned, startled, water splashing across his jeans. "Aunt Emily, I thought no one was in here. I was just cleaning up." Emily froze for a second, then let out a soft laugh that broke the tension. "Oh, you scared me? You clean now? Since when?" He smiled sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Since Mom said I had to earn my stay here." They both laughed, and for a moment, it felt like time folded in on itself. The little boy he used to be blending with the young man he'd become. The air between them carried something unfamiliar but tender, a quiet understanding of how time changes people in ways we never expect. As they worked side by side, wiping counters and rinsing towels, their laughter filled the small room. Ryan teased her about using too much cleaning spray, and she teased him about his messy hair. It was simple, easy, human, yet, underneath the laughter was something unspoken, an emotional current Emily couldn't quite name. She noticed how careful he was, how he made sure she didn't slip on the wet floor, how he'd hand her the towel before she even asked, how his voice softened when he spoke to her. It wasn't attraction. Not yet. It was connection, pure, fragile, and unexpected. When she turned to place the towel on the rack, her foot caught on the edge of the rug. In one ungraceful second, she lost her balance. The world tilted, the floor came rushing up, and then strong arms caught her mid-fall. Ryan had reached her just in time, holding her close to steady her. For a heartbeat, they didn't move. Her hands rested against his chest. She could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing. The moment stretched, quiet and surreal. "Careful," he whispered, his voice low but gentle. "You could have hurt yourself." Emily blinked, embarrassed yet oddly flustered. "I guess I'm not as coordinated as I used to be." He smiled. "You're fine. Just take it slow." When he helped her stand upright, their eyes met, and for the first time, Emily saw something different in his gaze. Not the playfulness of a teenager, but the calm, protective care of someone who noticed her, who understood her silence more than words could say. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the window like a heartbeat. "Thank you," she murmured, brushing her hair aside. "Anytime," he said quietly. And then, as if realizing how long he'd held her, Ryan stepped back, his face flushed with something between embarrassment and warmth. Emily smiled softly and turned toward the mirror. Her reflection looked different, less tired. Somehow, maybe it was just the laughter. Or maybe it was something else she couldn't explain. Later that afternoon, as the clouds cleared, Emily sat by the window with her tea. She replayed that small moment in her mind, the look in his eyes, the gentleness in his voice, the way her heart had fluttered for the first time in months. She reminded herself it was nothing, just kindness, just care. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had quietly shifted, that perhaps healing didn't always come from solitude, but from the way someone made you feel seen again. And when Ryan passed by the living room with a towel over his shoulder, glancing her way with that easy grin, Emily's chest tightened in a way she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't wrong. It wasn't inappropriate. It was simply human, a spark of connection between two people who had both been lonely for too long. That night, as she tried to sleep, The sound of rain returned. She could hear Ryan's footsteps from the room down the hall, and for reasons she couldn't explain, that sound felt comforting like a heartbeat in the quiet. She closed her eyes, telling herself it was just gratitude, just warmth. But her mind kept returning to that moment in the bathroom, when the world had paused and her heart had remembered what it was like to be caught not by surprise, but by care. Emily sighed, turning onto her side, unaware that the days ahead would test her heart in ways she never imagined, because that single, innocent moment was only the beginning. The next morning, sunlight poured gently through the kitchen blinds, painting golden lines across the wooden floor. Emily stood by the counter, stirring her coffee, lost in thought. The smell of roasted beans filled the air, but her mind was somewhere else, still lingering on yesterday. She couldn't forget that moment in the bathroom. The warmth of Ryan's arms, the steadiness of his voice, the way the world had gone completely still. She had told herself it was nothing more than a caring gesture, but her heart wasn't as convinced as her mind. "Morning, Aunt Em," Ryan's voice came from behind her. Cheerful and soft. She turned around, startled, nearly spilling her coffee. "Oh, morning. You scared me?" He laughed lightly. "You're jumpy today." "I just didn't hear you come in," she said, trying to sound casual. "Want some coffee?" "Sure," he replied, taking a seat at the table. He looked freshly showered, hair slightly damp, wearing a gray sweatshirt and jeans. He looked older somehow, not just in appearance, but in the quiet confidence he carried. Emily poured him a cup and set it down. "Still taking your mom's orders to clean everything?" she teased. He grinned, trying to stay useful. "Plus, I like helping out. Keeps my mind busy." Something in his tone caught her attention, that hint of sadness of someone who'd been through something hard. She remembered Claire mentioning his basketball injury, how he'd worked so hard for years, how the accident had changed everything. His scholarship was gone, his dream, uncertain. "You'll get back on your feet," Emily said softly, sitting across from him. "You've got time. You're strong, Ryan." He smiled faintly. "I used to think I was, but lately, I don't know. It's like everyone moved forward, and I just got stuck." Emily felt a pang of recognition. That was exactly how she had felt after her breakup left behind. While life went on without her, she looked at him for a moment, really looked, and realized they weren't so different. Two people trying to find themselves again in the middle of quiet days and rainy mornings. Over the next few days, their small routines began to overlap. They'd cook breakfast together, walk the dog, watch quiet TV shows in the evening. Nothing dramatic, just moments that filled the house with calm. Ryan had a habit of playing soft music while doing chores, sometimes jazz, sometimes old country songs his dad used to love. Emily found herself humming along, forgetting the heaviness she'd carried for months. One afternoon, as she folded laundry in the living room, she noticed Ryan sitting by the window sketching. The pencil moved quickly across the page, his brow slightly furrowed in focus. She smiled. "I didn't know you could draw." He looked up. "It's something I started after the injury. Helps clear my head. Can I see?" He hesitated for a second, then turned the sketchbook toward her. It was a simple pencil drawing, but it took her breath away. It was her sitting by that same window, hair falling over her shoulder, staring into the light just as she often did in the mornings. "You drew me?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. He nodded, a little shy. "I didn't mean for you to see it yet. It's not finished." Emily's chest tightened. The drawing wasn't perfect, but it felt real, like he'd captured something beyond appearance, something emotional. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "You have talent, Ryan." He smiled, but there was something deeper in his eyes. "You make it easy to draw. Aunt Em, you always look, calm, like you belong somewhere peaceful." Emily didn't know what to say. The air between them shifted again, subtle, but undeniable. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that drawing. Not because it flattered her, but because it had been seen through his eyes with care, attention, and quiet admiration. And yet, she kept telling herself it was just art. Just a moment of connection between two people healing. The next morning, the house was quiet again. Claire had called to say she'd be working late. Leaving them alone for the day, Emily decided to take a long bath to relax, unwind, and clear her head. The water was warm, scented with lavender. She closed her eyes, letting the stress of the week drift away. The sound of distant rain against the roof made her feel safe, cocooned in stillness. But then there was a soft knock at the door. "Aunt Emily." "Sorry, I didn't mean to bother you." Ryan's voice came through, hesitant. She opened her eyes, heart skipping. "It's okay. What is it?" I just wanted to let you know, Mom called. She said she'd be home late. Do you need me to make dinner? She smiled faintly, trying to steady her tone. That's sweet of you, Ryan. I'll help when I'm done here. All right, sure, he said, his voice soft. Take your time. She listened to his footsteps fade down the hall, then leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Something about the way he'd spoken, gentle, considerate, and mature, made her realize how deeply she'd come to rely on his presence. What started as comfort had turned into something she didn't have a name for. Something she wasn't ready to admit. That evening, they cooked dinner together, pasta and roasted vegetables, the kind of simple meal that felt like home. They laughed, teased each other about who was worse at chopping onions, and when their hands brushed by accident. Both went quiet for a moment. Emily looked at him then, not as the boy she'd known, but as the person he'd become, kind, thoughtful, unaware of how much light he brought into her days, and for the first time, she wondered if maybe fate didn't bring people into your life to stay in their old roles but to help you see love in a new way. After dinner, Ryan offered to wash the dishes. Emily stood beside him, drying each plate. The kitchen lights were soft, the world outside silent except for the rain, as she reached for a glass from his hand. Their fingers brushed again this time, neither pulled away. They didn't say anything, didn't have to. It was in the quiet that something beautiful and complicated was beginning to grow. The morning light crept softly into the living room, painting golden stripes on the wooden floor. Emily sat by the window again, holding a warm cup of tea, the same spot where Ryan had once drawn her. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, and the garden shimmered under the gentle sun. The past few days had changed something quietly but deeply. The house, once filled with silence, now carried laughter, shared breakfasts, and long conversations that lasted until midnight for Emily. It was like breathing again after holding her breath for too long. Ryan's company had reminded her of life's small joys, the comfort of morning coffee, the smell of rain, and the peace that comes from being seen and understood. But today felt different. Something was on his mind. Ryan came into the room, holding an envelope. His usual easy smile was replaced with a thoughtful expression. "Morning," Emily said, smiling gently. "You look serious. What's that?" He hesitated, sitting down across from her. "It's something I've been meaning to show you." He handed her the envelope. The handwriting on the front was slightly shaky but familiar. Claire's. Emily opened it carefully. Inside was a folded letter and a few old photographs, pictures of their family years ago. Backyard picnics, birthdays, Ryan as a little boy holding her hand. She smiled faintly. "Wow. I haven't seen these in years." Ryan nodded. "Mom found them in an old box. She said she wanted me to see what family looked like when things were simpler. Before Dad got sick, before everything changed." Emily looked at him softly. "You were just a kid when your dad passed, weren't you?" "Yeah. I was 10, he said quietly. "But I remember, you were there that whole summer. You helped Mom through it. I never forgot that." Her eyes softened. "You remember that?" He nodded. "You used to tell me stories every night so I could sleep. I didn't realize until now how much that meant." Emily smiled through a quiet ache in her chest. "Ryan, you don't know how much it means to hear that. Sometimes we think the little things we do don't matter, but they do." For a while, they sat in silence, just flipping through the old photographs. Each picture was a time capsule, a reminder of how people grow, heal, and drift, but still find their way back to each other. Then Ryan spoke again, his voice low but calm. "I was angry for a long time, Aunt Emily. At life. At myself. I thought losing basketball meant losing who I was. But these pictures, they reminded me I've always had more than that. Family. People who cared." Emily reached over and placed her hand gently on his. "You haven't lost who you are, Ryan. You've just changed paths. And sometimes, that's where the real strength shows up." He looked at her, a faint smile returning. "You really believe that?" "I do," she said softly, "because I had to believe it myself once." The afternoon passed in warmth. They spent hours talking about the past, funny memories, old mistakes, shared dreams. For the first time, Emily felt truly present. Later, while cleaning up the table, she found a folded piece of paper tucked beneath the photographs. It wasn't part of the letter, it was handwritten in Ryan's neat script. Curious, she opened it. It was a small note. "Dear Aunt Emily, you probably don't realize how much you've helped me these past weeks. You made me see light again when I was stuck in shadows. Thank you for being here, Ryan." Emily's throat tightened. It wasn't romantic, it was gratitude, pure and honest. The kind of note that makes a person realize the quiet power of kindness. That evening, when Ryan came in from walking the dog, she handed him the note. "You could have just told me this," she said, smiling through tears. He looked embarrassed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know, but I thought it'd sound silly if I said it out loud." She shook her head. "It's not silly, Ryan. It's beautiful, and I'm the one who should thank you. You've reminded me how to breathe again." They both smiled, no awkwardness, no confusion, just mutual understanding. Two hearts that had both been healing, now standing stronger. That night, Emily stood by her bedroom window, watching the stars. She thought about life, the unexpected ways it brings people together when they need it most. Maybe that was what love truly was, not romance, not longing, but the quiet act of caring for someone until they remember how to smile again. As she watched Ryan in the garden below, playing fetch with the dog under the porch light, she whispered softly to herself, "Sometimes healing finds you in the most unexpected places." She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of it. The next morning was bright and cool, the kind of day that felt like a fresh start. Emily stood by the kitchen window, pouring coffee, watching the sunlight dance across the garden. The scent of wet earth and pine filled the air, reminding her of the quiet peace she had found here. But beneath that calm, something in her heart felt uncertain, like a page waiting to be turned. Ryan hadn't come down for breakfast yet. That was unusual. He was always the first one up, making oatmeal or scrambled eggs, sometimes humming softly to himself. Emily knocked gently on his door. "Ryan, you awake?" No answer. She hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open slightly. The room was tidy, bed made, clothes folded, sketchbook neatly stacked on the desk. And then she saw an envelope resting on top of the sketchbook with her name written on it. Her heart skipped. She sat on the edge of his bed and opened it. Inside was a short letter. "Aunt Emily, I've been thinking a lot about what you said about strength and finding new paths. You were right. I applied for a volunteer program in Seattle that helps kids who've lost their confidence, like I did. They accepted me. I'm leaving this morning. I wanted to say goodbye, but I knew if I looked you in the eye, I wouldn't have the courage to go. Thank you for helping me believe in myself again. You changed more than you know, Ryan." Emily's hands trembled slightly as she read it, her eyes filled with tears, proud tears, not of sadness, but of deep affection. He hadn't run away. He'd found his direction, and somehow, that made her heart ache in the best possible way. She went outside, the wind brushing softly against her hair. The car was gone, and the driveway stood empty. The silence felt heavy for a moment, but then the breeze carried the faintest echo of laughter, the memory of the last few weeks. She smiled through the tears. "You did it, Ryan," she whispered. "You finally did." The house felt quieter now, too quiet. Emily walked into the living room and sat by the window, the same spot where he used to draw. She picked up his old pencil from the table. It still had traces of graphite on its tip. Then she noticed something else: his sketchbook, left behind on purpose. A yellow sticky note was attached to the front. "For you. I think you'll understand." She opened it. The first few pages were sketches of the house, the garden, their morning breakfasts. But then on the final page was a drawing of both of them sitting by the window, facing the light. It wasn't perfect, but it was full of life. Two people who had found peace, drawn in soft strokes, surrounded by sunlight, and below it, written in small letters, "Sometimes family isn't about who you wits, about who helps you become who you're meant to be." Emily pressed her hand over her mouth, feeling her heart swell. It wasn't just art, it was closure. It was a chapter ending beautifully. She placed the sketchbook beside her and leaned back against the couch, the morning light washing over her face. In that quiet moment, she realized something important. Ryan hadn't just healed because of her, she had healed because of him, too. That evening, Claire returned home, surprised to see Emily alone. "Where's Ryan?" she asked, setting her bag down. Emily smiled softly. "He left for Seattle. He's volunteering, helping kids find confidence again." Claire's eyes lit up with pride. "That's amazing. I didn't even know he applied." Emily nodded. "He didn't want to say anything until it was real. He's growing up, Claire." Her sister hugged her warmly. "You've done so much for him, Em. Thank you for being here." Emily smiled. "He did just as much for me." That night, Emily sat outside under the stars with a blanket around her shoulders. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She thought of Ryan's laughter, his sketches, the quiet understanding they shared. Not love in the romantic sense, but something deeper, Something that reminded her what it meant to care, to guide, and to let go. She whispered into the night. Wherever you are, Ryan, I hope you keep shining. The stars above seemed to answer back with their gentle glow. A week later, a letter arrived. Aunt Emily, Seattle is beautiful. The kids here are incredible. I tell them stories about courage, some of them are yours. Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't. I'll visit soon, Ryan. Emily folded the letter and placed it beside his sketchbook, smiling softly. Sometimes, healing wasn't about finding someone new, it was about rediscovering the beauty of connection, of purpose, of family, and though Ryan had gone, the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive with memories, laughter, and hope. It had been 3 quiet weeks since Ryan left for Seattle. The house had grown calm again, peaceful, but not lonely. Emily had filled her days with small things, tending to the garden, baking on rainy afternoons, and taking long walks along the river trail. But every morning, she'd glance at the sketchbook resting on the living room shelf. It had become a symbol, a reminder that even after heartbreak or loss, life could start over in unexpected ways. Sometimes, she'd open it just to look at the last page, the one where Ryan had drawn them sitting by the window, facing the light. Every time she saw it, she smiled. That morning, the phone rang while she was watering the plants. She wiped her hands quickly and picked it up. Hello. Hi, Aunt Emily. The familiar voice made her heart leap. Ryan, she said, laughing in surprise. Oh, it's so good to hear your voice. He chuckled softly. I wanted to call earlier, but things have been busy here. How are you? I'm wonderful, she said, and proud of you. How's Seattle treating you? You wouldn't believe it, Ryan replied. I've been working with a group of kids, teaching them how to draw, helping them build confidence. There's this one boy, Mason, who reminds me of, well, me, scared to try again, afraid to fail. Yesterday, he showed me his first sketch, and I couldn't stop smiling. Emily's heart swelled. That's incredible. Ryan, you found your purpose. Yeah, he said softly, but I wouldn't have, if it weren't for you. You were right, I just needed a new path. Emily smiled into the phone, eyes misty. I didn't do much, Ryan. You already had that strength in you. I just reminded you where to look. There was a pause. Then his tone grew quieter. I still miss home sometimes, and I miss our talks. She smiled gently. So do I, but that's what growing up is. Ryan, missing the people who helped you while you build something new. He laughed softly. You always know the right thing to say. They talked for nearly an hour about his volunteer work, his plans to start a small art class, the children who were learning to see beauty again through his guidance. For Emily, it was like hearing hope itself speak through the phone. When the call ended, she sat quietly for a long moment. The air around her felt lighter, full of gratitude. She realized that in helping Ryan heal, she had healed her own wounds too, the loneliness, the fear of being forgotten, the pain of her past heartbreak. Now, she was proud, not just of him but of herself. She picked up his sketchbook again, tracing her fingers over the final drawing. Then she whispered softly, You did it, Ryan. You became the light you were looking for. That evening, Emily received another surprise. Claire came home early, holding a package wrapped in brown paper. This came for you, she said with a smile. From Seattle. Emily's eyes widened. From Ryan. Her sister nodded. Looks like it. Emily carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a small canvas, one of Ryan's new paintings. It showed a woman standing by a window, sunlight pouring over her face, her expression calm and content. On the back, in neat handwriting, were the words, To Aunt Emily, for teaching me that light can always find its way back. Ryan. Emily pressed her hand to her heart. It wasn't just a painting, it was a message, a full circle. That night, as the stars shimmered above the quiet town, Emily placed the painting beside his sketchbook. The house felt warm again, not because of anyone inside, but because love, kindness, and understanding had filled every corner. She looked out the window, smiling softly. You're doing just fine, kiddo. And somewhere hundreds of miles away, in a small classroom in Seattle, Ryan paused mid-sketch, smiling for reasons he couldn't quite explain, as if he could hear her voice in the wind. It had been nearly 3 months since Ryan left for Seattle. The house had settled into its rhythm against off mornings, quiet afternoons, and the comforting peace of routine. But even in the calm, Emily often caught herself glancing toward the driveway, half expecting a familiar car to pull in. She missed his laughter echoing down the hall, his sketches spread across the dining table, his gentle way of turning silence into something warm. But she was also proud. She knew he was out there doing something meaningful, something he was born for. Life had given her a second chance to. She had started writing against something she hadn't done in years. Short stories about kindness, family, and healing. Stories inspired by Ryan, though she never mentioned his name. Her little blog had quietly grown. People from across the country left comments saying how her words made them feel less alone. That, to her, was enough. One Saturday afternoon, the doorbell rang. Emily wiped her hands on her apron and went to answer. When she opened the door, she froze. Ryan stood there, taller, healthier, glowing with quiet confidence. "Aunt Emily," he said with a wide grin, "I'm home." For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then she laughed, eyes glistening. "You didn't even tell me you were coming." He shrugged playfully. "Wanted it to be a surprise?" She pulled him into a warm hug. "You have no idea how proud I am of you." "I missed you," he murmured. "And I missed you, too," she said softly. The afternoon filled quickly with laughter, stories, and coffee. Ryan told her everything: how the kids in Seattle had grown to trust him, how he'd started teaching art workshops, and how one of his paintings was chosen for a local exhibit. But what touched her most was when he said, "Every time I felt unsure, I'd think of what you told me, that strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing up again." Emily smiled, tears threatening to fall. "And you did. You stood taller than ever." He looked at her with genuine warmth. "You taught me how." After dinner, Ryan handed her a small box wrapped neatly in blue paper. "What's this?" she asked, curious. "Just open it," he said, smiling. Inside was a framed picture print of his newest painting. It showed a scene almost identical to their old bathroom moment, a woman leaning slightly as if losing her balance, and a hand reaching out to catch her. But in the painting, their faces weren't visible, only their hands meeting in that single second of connection. Above it, he'd written the title, "The Moment That Changed Everything." Emily's breath caught. She ran her fingers gently over the frame. "Ryan, this is beautiful." He smiled quietly. "That's the day my life started to turn around. Not because I caught you, but because that moment reminded me that sometimes people hold you up when you can't stand on your own." Emily blinked back tears. "You're an artist in every sense of the word. You know that?" He grinned. "Only because I had the best teacher." The rest of the evening passed peacefully. The rain began to fall outside, soft, familiar, almost like the first day they'd shared weeks ago. As they sat by the window, sipping tea, the same window from all those sketches, Emily felt a quiet joy wash over her. She realized something powerful. Healing doesn't always come from being loved. Sometimes, it comes from learning to love again: life, people, and the moments that make you human. And that's exactly what they had done. When Ryan left for bed that night, he turned before going upstairs and said, "Thank you for everything, Aunt Emily." She smiled warmly. "You don't have to thank me anymore, Ryan. Just keep doing what you're doing. That's all the thanks I need." He nodded. "I will." Later, as the house went quiet, Emily stood by the window one last time. The rain shimmered under the porch light, and through it, she saw her own reflection, strong, content, calm. She whispered to herself, maybe that's what family really means. Finding the courage to catch each other when life slips. The wind brushed softly against the glass, as if agreeing. And in that gentle moment, Emily knew the story that began in that ordinary bathroom had turned into something extraordinary. A story of growth, faith, and love that stayed pure, honest, and eternal. The end.